This mysterious mermaid will shock you. Why she loves baby blood. The truth is terrifying. Must watch. In the heart of the dense jungle, hidden deep within the dark waters of a forbidden river, lives the mysterious River Queen. No one knows her true name, for she is both feared and revered. She rules the river with an iron grip, her presence felt in every ripple and whisper of the water. The villagers speak of her in hushed tones, for her power is unlike anything they've ever known. The queen is beautiful, but her beauty hides a terrifying secret, one that binds her to the river and drives her insatiable hunger for the blood of children. Deep within the jungle, where the trees grow thick and the shadows never fade, lies a secret long forgotten by time. The dense foliage hides the entrance to an ancient realm where no light can penetrate and no path leads in or out. Legends say the secret is guarded by powerful spirits, creatures born of darkness, who protect the River Queen's domain. It is here, in this forsaken place, that the River Queen draws her strength. Her power is tied to this forgotten secret, a curse that binds her to the river, and her terrifying thirst for blood. The spirit of the river is not a mere phantom. It is a fearsome force that commands the waters and all that live within it. Dark and formless, it moves like a shadow, always watching, always waiting. The villagers speak of its glowing red eyes that pierce the darkness, of the chilling whispers that echo through the trees at night. Some say it is the River Queen's soul, twisted and corrupted by years of thirst. Its power is limitless, and anyone who dares venture too close is said to disappear, never to be seen again. It started with the disappearance of a young child named Amara. One evening, she ventured to the riverbank, chasing butterflies in the fading light. Her laughter echoed through the jungle, but when the sun dipped below the horizon, silence took over. Her parents searched frantically, but there was no trace of her, only ripples in the water and an unnatural stillness in the air. The villagers were terrified. They knew this was no ordinary disappearance. A dark force had claimed her, and the whispers grew louder. The river was alive, and it had claimed its first victim. The village was never the same after Amara's disappearance. Whispers filled the air, spreading from house to house. The elders spoke of an ancient curse, a legend about a river queen who claimed the souls of children. Fear crept into every corner of the village, and parents kept their children close, never letting them wander near the river's edge. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more urgent. The villagers knew something dark was at play, and as the nights grew longer, the dread in their hearts deepened. The river had tasted blood, and it wasn't done yet. The legend of the River Queen had been passed down for generations, though most dismissed it as nothing more than a tale to frighten children. But now, with Amara's disappearance, the villagers began to remember. It was said that the queen was once a beautiful young woman, cursed by an ancient spirit. Her thirst for power and beauty drove her to drink the blood of children, forever binding her to the river. In exchange for eternal youth, she was forced to rule the waters, her spirit wandering the jungle in search of victims. The villagers' fear became a living truth. The village elders were the keepers of ancient knowledge, their faces weathered with age and their eyes filled with quiet wisdom. They knew the truth of the River Queen, even if they rarely spoke of it. They whispered of an ancient pact made long ago when the river was young and the jungle untouched. The queen had once been a protector, but her insatiable hunger for power had twisted her soul. The elders feared that the curse could never be broken, and that the river would always claim more children unless the village found a way to appease her thirst. Her name was Zuri, a bright, lively girl with dreams of adventure. One evening, she wandered away from the village, drawn by the sound of the river's rushing water. As she approached the bank, the air grew thick with an unnatural calm. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting eerie shadows that seemed to beckon her closer. Before anyone could notice she was gone, Zuri had disappeared, vanishing without a trace. The villagers searched in desperation, but the river kept its secret. The silence that followed was suffocating, and the terror of the queen's hunger deepened. A terrible fear spread throughout the village, gripping every heart with cold dread. The disappearances were no longer accidents. Something far darker was at work. Parents kept their children close, forbidding them from venturing near the river. Every rustle of leaves, every ripple in the water sent shivers down their spines. The villagers could feel the presence of the River Queen, her spirit lingering like a shadow over them. The very air seemed to thrum with her hunger. No one was safe. The village, once full of life and laughter, now lived in constant terror, waiting for the next child to vanish. As the moon rose high in the sky, a sense of unease fell over the village. One by one, children began to vanish during the night. It started with soft whispers in the dark, followed by a chill in the air. Then, the quiet cries of children could be heard, but when the villagers rushed to check, there was no one there. Only the ripples of the river moved, as if mocking their desperation. No trace remained of the missing children, and the fear that the River Queen's hunger was growing stronger spread like wildfire through the village. Panic gripped the village like a vice, and the once thriving community was now a shadow of its former self. The streets, once filled with the laughter of children, were eerily quiet. Everyone feared the river. Mothers locked their doors at night, and fathers stood guard, their eyes never leaving the dark waters. But no matter how vigilant they were, the River Queen's spirit always found a way. Each disappearance felt like a personal loss, and the villagers' hope faded with every passing day. The darkness seemed to swallow the light, and the village knew they were powerless to stop it. The villagers began to notice a change in the river. The once clear water turned dark, swirling with an unnatural depth. It seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, as if the river itself was alive, watching them. The surface no longer shimmered in the sunlight. Instead, it reflected the sky with a dull, menacing hue. Those who dared approach the water felt a cold grip tighten around their hearts. The river's darkness was growing stronger, feeding the hunger of the River Queen. The villagers could no longer deny it. Something evil was stirring in the depths, and it was coming for them. Desperation led the village king to seek a solution, even if it meant bargaining with the River Queen herself. Under the cover of night, he ventured to the edge of the dark waters, calling out for her. The river responded with a cold, whispering voice, promising peace in exchange for a sacred offering. The queen demanded a child each year, one chosen by the river's will. In return, she would spare the village from further loss. The king, torn between saving his people and the innocence of his children, reluctantly agreed, hoping the promise would be enough to end the terror. The River Queen's hunger was unrelenting. It was more than just a thirst for blood. It was a desperate craving that consumed her very soul. Each child she took fed the curse that bound her to the river, but it also drove her to madness. She no longer cared for beauty or power. She only sought the blood of the innocent to ease the eternal ache within her. The more she drank, the stronger she became, her spirit feeding off the fear she sowed. And with every disappearance, the river grew darker, as if the queen's hunger could never truly be satisfied. One night, a piercing cry shattered the stillness of the village. It was a sound filled with terror, echoing through the trees and vibrating in the hearts of everyone who heard it. The cry was familiar, the anguished scream of a child being taken. The villagers rushed into the night, following the sound, but it faded as quickly as it had come, swallowed by the thick jungle. In the distance, the river whispered, as if mocking their futile search. The queen's presence was felt more strongly now, and the village knew that the darkness was closing in, claiming yet another soul. On the wind, there came a sound, a soft, melodic call that seemed to echo from deep within the river. It was gentle at first, like a lullaby, but it carried a dark, hypnotic power. The children, drawn to the sound, would wander toward the river, their faces blank with an unspoken yearning. The river called to them, and they could not resist. It was the River Queen summoning them with her voice, pulling them toward her dark realm. No one could escape once they heard the call. The village watched in horror as their children, entranced, vanished into the river's depths. The jungle was not as it seemed. Beneath the canopy of trees, spirits roamed, silent watchers, protectors of the ancient forest. They were the guardians of the sacred land, unseen but always present. When the River Queen's curse began to spread, these spirits stirred, disturbed by the dark force creeping into their territory. Some believed the spirits were allies of the queen, aiding in her hunt for the children. Others thought they were the last defense against her power. As the village grew weaker, the jungle spirits whispered warnings to those brave enough to listen, hinting at a way to stop the terror. The River Queen's true hunger was a secret, hidden beneath her beauty and fearsome power. It wasn't simply blood that she craved, but the life force of the children, their innocence, their joy, their untainted spirits. Each drop of blood she consumed strengthened her, but it also deepened her curse. The more she fed, the more she became a part of the river itself, her essence woven into the water's very flow. Her hunger was insatiable, driven by an ancient force she could not control. No matter how much she consumed, the thirst would always return, dragging her deeper into madness. The tale of the missing children had become the village's darkest story, passed down with fear in every whisper. It wasn't just a string of disappearances, it was the mark of the River Queen's curse. The children were taken not by chance, but by design, their lives drained to feed the Queen's endless hunger. One by one, they vanished, leaving behind only the echoes of their laughter and a river that seemed to grow darker with each loss. The village lived in dread, haunted by the knowledge that the Queen's thirst was never quenched, and that no child was safe. The village was sinking into despair. With every new disappearance, the hope of survival seemed to fade. Fathers built stronger fences, but the children still vanished. Mothers wept, their hearts heavy with fear, knowing the river's call could claim their children at any moment. The elders gathered in secret, whispering of ancient rites and forgotten magic, but no solution seemed to work. The river's curse had woven itself too deeply into their lives. Desperation set in as the village realized the River Queen was more than a legend. She was an unyielding force, and only a great sacrifice could stop her.
The village king could no longer stand by, watching as his people crumbled under the queen's curse. He embarked on a journey deep into the jungle, seeking answers from ancient shrines and forgotten spirits. Guided only by whispers from the elders, the king journeyed through dense forests and treacherous paths, determined to find a way to break the River Queen's hold. Days turned into weeks, but with each step, the jungle seemed to close in around him. The king's heart grew heavy with fear, knowing that the fate of the village, and his own child, depended on the answers he would uncover. The deeper the king ventured into the jungle, the stronger the sense of something dark and ancient pressing in on him. The air grew thick with an oppressive heaviness, and the distant sounds of the river became a low, growling hum. He could feel eyes upon him, unseen but ever watchful. The river's darkness wasn't just in the water. It was in the very soul of the jungle itself, a malevolent force that twisted the land and its creatures. As he approached the heart of the river's domain, the king realized that to face the River Queen, he would need more than courage. He would need a great sacrifice. The River Queen's power was unlike anything the king had ever encountered. She controlled the very waters, her will bending the river to her desires. The trees trembled when she called, and the jungle seemed to hold its breath in her presence. Her beauty was a trap, hiding the terrifying strength that flowed through her veins. No one dared to challenge her rule over the river, for her wrath was swift and brutal. Her power grew with every child she claimed, and with it, the dark spirit of the river deepened, wrapping the jungle in an eternal, suffocating grip. As more children vanished, the village's hope slowly crumbled. What had once been a thriving, peaceful community now stood on the edge of ruin. The laughter of children was replaced by the haunting silence of fear. The elders' advice seemed useless, and the king's search for answers appeared to lead nowhere. Desperation clouded every face. Parents no longer slept, their minds filled with the terror of losing their children. The once vibrant village was now a place of shadow, its heart slowly dying with every passing day. The people felt helpless, knowing that the River Queen's hunger was insatiable and endless. The jungle was alive with whispers, and the spirits that haunted the river were not mere myths. They were real, and they served the River Queen. Dark shadows moved beneath the water, their forms barely visible to the naked eye, but their presence was undeniable. These spirits were once protectors of the land, but now they were twisted, bound to the Queen's curse. Their eerie cries echoed through the jungle, urging the Queen onward, guiding her to her next victim. The villagers spoke of them in hushed tones, for to see these spirits meant that the river's hunger was near. It began as a soft, innocent laughter, echoing through the jungle as children played near the river's edge. But suddenly the air shifted. The laughter turned to screams, loud, blood-curdling cries that sent waves of panic through the village. The children's faces twisted with terror as the river seemed to swallow them whole. The water churned violently, pulling them under. The villagers rushed to the riverbank, but the children were gone, lost to the River Queen's insatiable hunger. The sound of the screams lingered in the air long after, a haunting reminder of the Queen's power over their lives. At the heart of the river, where the water was deepest and the shadows darkest, stood the Queen's throne. It was not a throne of gold or stone, but one carved from twisted roots, dark wood, and the bones of creatures long forgotten. It sat high on a cliff overlooking the churning waters, a place of dreadful beauty. The River Queen would sit upon it, her cold eyes watching the jungle below, ruling over both the land and the souls trapped in her curse. Her throne was a symbol of her dominion, where her power grew stronger with every soul claimed. The river's call was hypnotic, drawing anyone who heard it toward the water's edge. It was a sound like no other, soft yet urgent, as though the river itself were whispering secrets of the deep. The villagers knew it well. It called to the children, luring them into the depths with promises of adventure and hidden treasures. But the truth was far darker. The river's calling was a trap, and anyone who followed it would be lost forever. The Queen's voice flowed through the water, a deadly siren song that no one could resist once it had begun to sing. A strange sickness began to spread through the village, causing fear and unrest. At first, it seemed like nothing more than an illness, with children growing weak and feverish. But as the days passed, it became clear that something darker was at play. The sickness drained the life from those who caught it, leaving them pale and listless. The elders whispered that the Queen's curse had seeped into the very air, her darkness infecting everyone around her. No one could escape its reach. The village, once full of vitality, now seemed to wither. Just like the children she had claimed when night fell, the River Queen's eyes would glow with an eerie red light, piercing through the darkness. They were the only sign of her presence, her gaze searching for the next child to claim. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, terrified of seeing those glowing eyes watching them from the river's edge. The glow was not just a physical light. It was a beacon, drawing in the innocent and vulnerable. It was said that anyone who met her gaze would fall under her spell, compelled to walk toward the river, where their fate was sealed. The village elders spoke in secret, their voices low and filled with fear. They knew of an ancient magic, forbidden and dangerous, tied to the river and its queen. Long ago, powerful shamans had bound the queen to the river with dark sorcery, but the magic had come at a terrible cost. Now, the queen's hunger could never be satisfied, and each year, she would claim more lives to feed the curse. The elders feared that only a counter-curse, even darker than the first, could stop her, but such magic came at a price that no one dared to pay. The river's waters were no longer a source of life. They had become a reflection of the queen's twisted power. Once clear and flowing, they had turned dark and murky, as though the very soul of the river had been corrupted. The water moved with a sinister current, pulling anything that came too close into its depths. The villagers could see strange shapes moving beneath the surface, shadows of the lost children who had been claimed by the queen. Those who dared touch the water spoke of an unnatural cold, as if the river itself was alive and watching, waiting every night. The village fell into an uneasy slumber, its people too frightened to sleep soundly. Parents would keep watch, listening for the sound of the river's call, a reminder that the River Queen's curse was always near. The children huddled close to their mothers, and even the bravest men could not shake the feeling that something watched from the shadows. The village had become a place of restless fear, where even the moonlight seemed to carry a sense of doom. Each passing night felt like a countdown to when the queen would claim yet another soul from their midst. One night, as the moon hung heavy in the sky, a mother stood by the river, her heart breaking with despair. Her child had been taken, pulled into the river's depths by the queen's call. With tears streaming down her face, she cried out to the river, begging for mercy. She pleaded with the River Queen, offering anything to have her child returned. Her voice broke with sorrow, but the river responded only with silence, cold and unfeeling. The villagers watched in horror, knowing that the queen's thirst could never be sated by anything less than the blood of innocence. Deep in the jungle, the spirits of the land stirred. Ancient and wise, they had long protected the forest, but now, with the River Queen's curse spreading, their voices became restless. One by one, the spirits whispered their warnings to those who could hear, those brave enough to listen. They spoke of an old magic that could weaken the queen's power. Hidden deep within the jungle, the spirits could guide the village to the cure, but only if someone dared to face the darkness and challenge the river's hold. The jungle spirits were the last hope, but their help came with great risk. Amidst the chaos of the river's terror, one child remained. A tiny girl named Nia, too young to understand the horrors that had claimed so many, was the last to be spared. Her mother, a fierce protector, had hidden her away, keeping her safe from the queen's call. Nia's innocent laughter echoed in the empty village, a painful reminder of what had been lost. The villagers, torn between hope and despair, saw her as a symbol of their final chance to save themselves. But the queen's hunger would not wait, and Nia's fate was now intertwined with the village's survival. Long before the village knew her name, the River Queen had claimed her first victim. A young boy named Kwame had wandered too close to the water, drawn by its hypnotic shimmer. The river's dark waters wrapped around him like a cold embrace, pulling him under. His screams echoed in the night, but they were swallowed by the river's depths. The villagers had heard of strange disappearances in distant lands, but none had imagined it could reach them. From that day, the queen's hunger grew, and the river became a cursed place, a reminder that she was always watching, waiting. The mystery of the vanishing children baffled the village. Every time a child disappeared, no one could explain how or why. Some said it was the River Queen's will, while others whispered of dark spirits that walked the jungle, claiming innocent lives. No one dared to go near the river after dusk, but still, children were drawn to it. Their disappearances were as sudden as they were silent. The village lived in fear, unsure of how to stop the queen's hunger. Each loss felt like a piece of their soul slipping away into the dark, unyielding river. The king's heart was heavy with fear as he watched his people suffer. His own child had nearly fallen victim to the queen's curse, and his dreams were haunted by the faces of the missing children. Every night, he lay awake, tortured by the thought of what would happen if the river claimed more. He feared for his village, for his family, and for himself. Desperation clouded his thoughts. He knew he had to find a way to end the terror, but the queen's power was too great. The fear of failure weighed heavily on him, and with it, the fate of all. The River Queen's hunger was a force that could never be sated. No matter how many children she took, no matter how much blood she drank, her craving only grew stronger. It was a hunger that fed not just her body, but her soul, a curse that bound her to the river and to the jungle itself. The villagers learned that the queen was not merely a creature of flesh and bone, but a manifestation of the river's ancient curse. As her appetite grew, so did the darkness in the water, and with each passing day, the river became more dangerous, more alive. With the village on the brink of collapse, the king made a desperate decision. He gathered the bravest warriors and the wisest elders, seeking a way to confront the River Queen and end her reign of terror. He knew there was no simple solution, no spell or weapon strong enough to defeat her hunger. The king faced a painful choice: sacrifice something precious to break the curse, or risk losing everything. His heart ached at the thought, but he understood the weight of his duty. The lives of his people rested on the outcome of this dangerous gamble, and time was running out. A group of brave warriors, each chosen for their strength and courage, stood ready to face the River Queen. They had trained their whole lives for battles against wild beasts and enemies, but this was something unlike anything they had ever encountered. The River Queen was no mere monster. She was a force of nature, a spirit tied to the land and waters. Yet, these warriors, driven by love for their families and a burning desire to protect the village, volunteered to face the unknown. Their hearts were full of fear, but their resolve was stronger, knowing the fate of the village rested on their shoulders. The entire village gathered, their faces filled with a mix of fear and determination. The elders whispered ancient prayers, while the warriors sharpened their weapons and prepared for the journey into the heart of the jungle. The mothers held their children close, praying for their safety, while the fathers steeled themselves for the battle ahead. It wasn't just the king's decision anymore. It was the will of the people. Together, they would face the River Queen. The villagers knew that this battle could cost them everything, but they were willing to fight for the future of their children and the survival of their home. The village's plan to save the children was bold and dangerous. The elders revealed an ancient ritual, one that could potentially weaken the River Queen's power, but it came with great risk. The ritual required the blood of a willing sacrifice, a child chosen by the queen, and a special incantation that had to be spoken at the river's deepest point, where the queen's spirit was strongest. The villagers knew that if they failed, the river would claim them all. With heavy hearts, they selected the bravest among them to carry out the plan, knowing the path ahead was fraught with peril. As the villagers ventured deeper into the jungle, the air grew thick with an unnatural stillness. The shadows seemed to shift, as though they were alive, watching their every move. The jungle that had once been their home now felt like an alien world, full of hidden dangers. The trees whispered, their branches creaking like old bones, and the underbrush rustled with movements that couldn't be explained. The villagers pressed on, hearts pounding with fear, knowing the spirits of the jungle were both watching them and testing them. Every step felt like a step closer to the queen, and to their doom. As the villagers reached the river's edge, a heavy silence fell over them. The once roaring waters now flowed eerily calm, as if the river itself was holding its breath. The water shimmered with an unnatural glow, reflecting the moon in a haunting way. It was as though the river was warning them to turn back, to leave its domain before it claimed them all. Yet the villagers stood firm, unwilling to retreat. The river's silence was more terrifying than any roar, for it signaled that the River Queen was watching, waiting for them to make their next move. As the villagers stepped closer to the river's depths, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with an undeniable force. Suddenly, the water began to churn, as though something beneath the surface was stirring. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the river, followed by a piercing wail. The queen's spirit had awakened, furious and hungry. The ground shook, and the air turned icy cold, filled with her wrath. The villagers could feel her presence, a force of pure malice that sought to crush them. Her spirit lashed out from the river, a terrifying reminder that she was not easily defeated. The king, driven by a fierce determination, stood at the forefront of the villagers as they prepared to confront the River Queen. This mission was not only to save his people but to redeem his own soul, for he knew that his bloodline had been touched by the curse. With each step toward the river, he carried the weight of the village's hope and the lives of his children. His heart burned with a resolve that could not be shaken. This sacred mission, though filled with peril, was the village's last chance to break the queen's hold over them. As the villagers ventured deeper into the queen's domain, the true nature of the river's darkness became clear. The water, once clear and beautiful, was now thick and murky, swirling with a malevolent force. Beneath the surface, twisted shapes and ghostly figures drifted, the souls of the children who had been taken. The river's surface reflected nothing but darkness, as if it had become a mirror of the queen's cursed soul. The villagers could feel the weight of the water pulling at them, as if the river itself was alive, a dark, sentient force that thirsted for more. The journey into the jungle grew more treacherous with each passing moment. The dense foliage tangled around their legs, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Strange, unseen creatures watched from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The path ahead was unclear, as if the jungle itself sought to lead them astray. The villagers pressed on, their resolve hardening despite the dangers. They knew they had no choice. Only by reaching the heart of the river could they hope to confront the queen. But with every step, the jungle seemed to grow darker, more alive with menace. As the villagers ventured deeper into the jungle, they began to feel an unusual presence, an unseen force guiding them. The jungle spirits, once guardians of the land, now stirred in response to their mission. Faint whispers filled the air, their voices gentle but clear. The spirits had sensed their courage and offered subtle guidance. Glowing trails of light flickered in the trees, and faint melodies carried on the wind. Though the path was still perilous, the spirits' guidance gave the villagers hope. They knew that with each step, they were drawing closer to breaking the River Queen's curse, despite the dangers ahead. After days of navigating through the jungle, the villagers finally reached the heart of the river. There, hidden among the tangled roots and vines, stood the queen's lair, a place where the very air seemed heavy with malevolent power. The ground was damp, and the water flowed sluggishly, thick with an unnatural dark hue. The lair pulsed with a sinister energy, as if the River Queen herself was waiting, watching. It was a place of pure evil, where the queen's spirit resided, and the villagers knew that confronting her here would be their greatest test yet. Only one path lay ahead. In the depths of the queen's lair, a child stood, Nia, the last to be spared. Unbeknownst to her, she was the key to ending the River Queen's reign of terror. The ancient spirits had chosen her, for she was pure of heart and untouched by the curse. Her innocent blood was the only thing that could break the river's hold. As Nia stood at the water's edge, the villagers realized that she had to make a terrible choice: to offer herself as the sacrifice that would shatter the queen's power, or risk losing everything to her insatiable hunger. The villagers had learned that the River Queen's curse was not just a spell, it was an ancient, unbreakable bond, forged by dark magic long before their time. Her thirst for blood was a punishment, a twisted result of her greed for eternal life. The more children she consumed, the stronger her curse became, until it could never be lifted without a great sacrifice. The queen's power was entwined with the river itself, a cycle that could never be broken unless a life was willingly given, one pure enough to counter her evil. The villagers now understood the terrible price they would have to pay. As the villagers stepped deeper into the lair, they were met by the restless spirits that guarded the queen's domain. These ancient beings, once protectors of the jungle, were now twisted by the river's curse, bent on keeping intruders away. They howled and screeched, their forms shifting like smoke. The villagers, armed with only their courage and the guidance of the jungle spirits, fought back. The battle was fierce, with the spirits clawing and screeching, determined to prevent them from reaching the queen. But the villagers pressed on, knowing the future of the village depended on overcoming these dark forces. As the villagers advanced further into the queen's lair, the river roared with a furious rage. The once calm waters now churned violently, crashing against the banks with an unnatural force. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, vibrating with the queen's anger. The sound of the river's fury echoed like a warning, each ripple carrying her wrath. The villagers, hearts pounding in fear, knew they had crossed a point of no return. The river had become a beast, alive and hostile, doing everything in its power to drive them away, but they would not turn back. The final battle had begun. The River Queen's heart was as twisted as the river itself, cold, unyielding, and consumed by hunger. Once a beautiful woman, her desire for power and immortality had corrupted her soul, binding her to the waters forever. Her heart pulsed with an insatiable thirst for the life force of children, and each drop of blood she drank twisted her deeper into darkness. As the villagers approached, they could feel the weight of her malice radiating from the very water that surrounded them. The queen's heart was her power, and destroying it would be the only way to break the curse that bound her. In the depths of the river's lair, the River Queen had claimed her final victim, the king's own child. Nia, the last innocent soul, was now at the mercy of the queen. The villagers had hoped to save her, but the queen's hunger was relentless, and she had already marked Nia as the final sacrifice needed to secure her rule over the land forever. As the child stood on the riverbank, her innocent eyes wide with fear, the villagers realized that the queen's grip had tightened, and the last hope to break her curse was slipping away into the dark waters. Seeing his child in the grasp of the River Queen, the king's heart burned with fury. All the years of watching his people suffer, the fear and pain of losing his child, erupted in a tidal wave of rage. With a roar that shook the very ground, he charged forward, his sword raised high. The river itself seemed to tremble in response, the waters darkening with the queen's wrath. The king's eyes burned with determination. This was the moment to end her reign. Every ounce of his love for his people and his child fueled his every step toward the queen, ready for the final battle. The villagers, filled with a shared resolve, stood united behind their king. Fear had been replaced by courage, as each person knew what was at stake. The mothers, fathers, warriors, and elders all stepped forward, their eyes locked on the River Queen. Together, they prepared for the final battle to free their land from the curse that had haunted them for so long. The jungle whispered its support, and the spirits of the land, no longer bound by the queen's control, joined in. Every step forward was a step toward reclaiming their lives, their children, and their future from the river's grip. As the battle raged on, the villagers discovered a hidden truth. The River Queen's power was tied to her deepest weakness. She was bound to the river, but her connection to it was fragile. The queen's hunger had made her dependent on the blood of the innocent, and without it, she began to weaken. The villagers realized that by cutting her link to the river's source, they could strip her of her power. The queen's terrifying strength faltered as her curse unraveled, exposing the vulnerability she had hidden for centuries. The villagers now had a chance to defeat her, but the battle was far from over. In the heart of the final battle, the power of love and family became the villagers' greatest weapon. The king, with his fierce love for his child, stood at the forefront, determined to protect Nia at all costs. The villagers fought not for themselves but for the future of their families and the memory of those already lost. Their unity was their strength. As they pressed forward, The queen's curse weakened with every act of bravery and selflessness. It was their bonds, those deep, unbreakable connections, that became the very force that began to unravel the queen's power and bring her reign to an end. As the battle between the villagers and the River Queen reached its peak, something unexpected happened. The jungle grew eerily quiet. The rustling leaves and distant animal calls fell still. Even the river's raging waters seemed to hold their breath. The spirits of the jungle, once bound by the queen's curse, stood watching, waiting. It was as if nature itself had paused, waiting for the queen's reign to end. In this unnatural silence, the villagers knew the moment had come. The queen's hold on the land was slipping, and the jungle's peaceful whispers signaled that victory was within reach. As the final blow was struck, the River Queen let out a soul-shattering cry. Her spirit, long twisted by greed and hunger, screamed in agony, echoing through the river and the jungle. The sound was a mixture of rage, sorrow, and desperation, as though she realized her reign was over. Her once mighty form trembled, the curse unraveling with every tear that fell from her eyes. Her spirit, bound to the river for so long, could no longer sustain itself. The jungle shuddered as her dark power began to dissipate, and the river's surface grew calm, free at last from her corruption. With the queen's spirit fading into the night, the villagers stood victorious, though exhausted. The jungle, once thick with darkness and fear, began to breathe again. The river, now calm and clear, no longer echoed with the queen's rage. The villagers, their hearts still pounding, gathered around the king and Nia, who had been saved from the queen's grasp. The curse that had haunted their people for generations was finally broken. Tears of relief and joy flowed freely as they embraced each other, knowing that their families, their children, were safe once more. Peace had returned, and the village was free. The king, standing tall among his people, felt an overwhelming sense of relief, yet deep exhaustion. His heart, once heavy with fear and uncertainty, now beat with pride. He had faced the River Queen's dark power head-on, driven by love for his child and the village. His courage had been tested, and though the journey had been grueling, he had never faltered. With his people's strength behind him, he had led them to victory. His bravery not only freed the village but also inspired a legacy of hope. The king had proven that even in the darkest moments, courage could triumph. With the queen's spirit vanishing into the depths of the river, the curse that had plagued the land for so long was finally broken. The once dark waters of the river began to clear, reflecting the starlit sky above. The air, thick with fear and sorrow for years, became light and fresh. The oppressive weight that had held the village captive lifted, leaving behind a sense of peace and renewal. The jungle, too, seemed to breathe again, its whispers now gentle and comforting. The curse was gone, and for the first time in generations, the village was free from the queen's torment. As the River Queen's spirit dissolved into the river's depths, her final scream echoed through the jungle. It was a cry of agony and rage, one that seemed to shake the very earth beneath their feet. Her once powerful form, now reduced to nothing more than an echo, left behind an empty silence. The sound faded into the distance, swallowed by the river's calm, but its haunting presence lingered in the hearts of the villagers. The queen's reign had ended, and yet her scream would forever be a reminder of the terror she had brought, and the strength it took to overcome her. The village erupted into joyous celebration as the darkness that had plagued them for so long finally lifted. The river, once a place of fear, now glistened under the moonlight, peaceful and serene. The villagers, their faces filled with relief, embraced one another, their hearts lighter than they had been in years. The king, his child safe and the village's future secure, looked around at the people who had stood together in the face of unimaginable terror. The victory was not just his, it was theirs. Together, they had reclaimed their home and their lives from the clutches of darkness. As the last remnants of the queen's curse faded into the night, the children of the village returned to the safety of their homes. No longer would they be taken in the dead of night, their laughter replaced by silence. The village celebrated, for their most precious treasures, their children had been saved. Mothers held their children close, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. The laughter of the young ones filled the air once more, echoing through the streets. What had been stolen was now returned, and the future of the village, once uncertain, was now full of hope and promise. With the River Queen's reign of terror over, the river's waters, once dark and tumultuous, began to calm. The surface, which had been churning with anger and hunger, now reflected the peaceful sky above. The once thick murkiness faded, revealing clear, shimmering waters that flowed gently through the jungle. The village watched in awe as the river transformed before their eyes, as if it too had been freed from the Queen's curse. The soothing sound of the river's flow became a symbol of peace, a reminder that no darkness could last forever and that light in the end would always prevail. As the village celebrated, the king stood by the river's edge, watching the calm waters. The burden that had weighed heavily on his heart for so long was finally lifted. He had lost so much, his people, his child, his hope, but in this moment he felt the healing power of peace. The terror that had plagued the village and his heart was gone. The river, once a source of dread, now symbolized renewal. His child, safe and sound, ran beside him, and the king's heart swelled with gratitude. His people were free, and his soul was whole once more. The village came alive with celebration. Music filled the air, and the sound of dancing echoed through the streets. The people, once shackled by fear, now celebrated their newfound freedom. Children laughed and played, their innocence no longer threatened by the river's curse. The king and his people gathered in the village square, sharing stories of their victory over the River Queen. The air was thick with joy, as the weight of years of terror had finally been lifted. The village had not only reclaimed its future, but it had also rediscovered the power of unity, hope, and love. As peace settled over the village, the last remnants of the Queen's curse began to unravel. The river, once so mysterious and full of darkness, now revealed its true nature. Beneath its surface, the villagers discovered ancient carvings, symbols and stories of a time long before the Queen's reign. The river had once been a sacred place, a source of life and prosperity, but the Queen's thirst had corrupted it. With the curse broken, the river's true beauty emerged. It was not a place of fear, but of life, connection, and balance, reminding the villagers of their deep ties to nature. The River Queen's true desire was never power, nor beauty, nor eternal life. Beneath her curse, she longed for connection, something lost when she chose the path of darkness. In her quest for immortality, she had become disconnected from the very source of life, the river itself. The more she took, the more isolated she became, her spirit unraveling. Her hunger was not for blood, but for the love and warmth she had abandoned. The villagers learned that her true tragedy lay in her loss of humanity, and her torment was rooted in a longing that could never be fulfilled. With the River Queen's spirit finally gone, the terror that had plagued the village for so long came to an end. The river, once a place of fear and sorrow, now flowed peacefully through the jungle, a symbol of renewal. No longer would children disappear in the dead of night, or be claimed by the Queen's dark hunger. The village, once gripped by dread, was now free. The oppressive weight that had shadowed their lives for generations lifted, and for the first time in years, the villagers could breathe easily, knowing that the river's terror had been vanquished forever. As peace returned to the village, the elders gathered the people to reveal the hard truth behind the River Queen's curse. The Queen was not a mere monster, but a tragic figure, twisted by her own choices. She had once been a protector of the river, but her greed and thirst for power had corrupted her soul, binding her to the river and trapping her in an endless cycle of hunger. The villagers now understood that her reign was not born of malice, but of a deep, tragic desire for connection. With this truth, they mourned the queen's lost humanity, even as they celebrated their victory. With the River Queen's terror vanquished, the children of the village were finally free to grow and thrive. No longer would they fear the river's call or the darkness that lurked in the night. Their laughter echoed through the streets once more, filling the air with joy and innocence. The villagers, especially the parents, watched with grateful hearts as their children played without fear. The future was now bright, full of possibilities. The village had been reborn, and the children, once the victims of a curse, would now grow up in a world of peace, surrounded by love and safety. The king, once burdened by fear and doubt, had proven that wisdom and courage could overcome even the darkest forces. His decisions, guided by love for his people and his family, had led the village to victory. He had faced the River Queen head-on, not with brute strength, but with a clear mind and an unshakable resolve. In the end, it was his wisdom that unraveled the queen's curse and freed the village. The people, grateful for his leadership, saw in him not just a ruler, but a beacon of hope, someone whose wisdom had restored peace and unity to their land. The once feared river had transformed, no longer a source of dread, but a symbol of hope and renewal. Its waters, now clear and serene, reflected the beauty of the land around it. The villagers, who had once trembled at the thought of its depths, now approached it with reverence and peace. The river no longer whispered dark secrets or called to the innocent. Instead, it flowed gently, nourishing the land and sustaining life. The village had reclaimed its future, and the river, freed from the queen's curse, had become a reminder of their strength, unity, and triumph over darkness.